Cross and Creed: How NSCN-IM used religion to absorb Old Kuki tribes into the Naga fold. In the deep and rugged hills of Chandel, a district nestled in the southeastern part of present-day Kuki-controlled territory, the lives of tribal communities have been caught in the crossfire of politics, identity, and faith. Here, tribes like the Anal, Kom, Lamkang, Moyon, Monsang, Mering, and others historically recognized under the broader Kuki ethno-linguistic family have experienced a gradual but systemic transformation of identity. This transformation, however, has not emerged organically. It has been meticulously orchestrated over decades, shaped by the ideological machinations of the National Socialist Council of Nagalim Muivah, NSCN-IM, and fueled by religious institutions like the Tangkhul Baptist Church. This is the story of how politics wore the robe of religion to redraw ethnic boundaries, how Old Kuki tribes were claimed under the Naga umbrella, not by cultural affinity or historical record, but by the strategic deployment of faith, theology, and coercion. Long before the emergence of Naga nationalism, the tribes of Chandel had a shared history with the larger Kuki ethno-linguistic group. British colonial anthropologists and administrators such as T.C. Hodson and G.A. Grierson had identified the Anal, Kom, Lamkang, and others as branches of the Old Kuki stocker classification based on language, custom, clan system, and territorial settlements. These tribes, while having their own dialects and sub-identities, were integrally part of the Kuki migration and settlement history that spans across present-day Northeast India, Myanmar, and Bangladesh. They practiced a traditional religion based on animism and ancestor worship, and their early contact with Christian missionaries did not significantly alter their ethnic consciousness. However, after Indian independence, and particularly after the 1960s, as Naga insurgency gained traction, a new ideological current began to sweep across these Hilsa current, shaped by armed politics and evangelism. The formation of NSCN in 1980 and the eventual split into NSCN-IM and NSCN-K in 1988 marked a turning point in the politics of identity in the hills of northeast India. Led by Thuingaleng Muivah, a Tangkhul Naga from Manipur, the NSCN-IM began to push for the idea of Greater Nagalim, an irredentist vision that sought to unify all Naga inhabited areas across India and Myanmar into a single sovereign entity. But demography did not favor their narrative. The Naga population, especially outside Nagaland, was limited in number and spatial spread. In order to legitimize their territorial claims, the NSCN-IM needed to increase the headcount of Nagas. That meant drawing in tribes that had historically never identified as Nagas. This is where religion, specifically Christianity, became a potent political tool. With strong ties to American Baptist missions, became the ideological and evangelical arm of NSCN-IM's expansionist agenda. Headquartered in Ukhrul and having a wide network of churches, schools, and training institutions, it served as both a religious and social control mechanism. Through its outreach programs, theological training, and development projects, the Tangkhul Baptist Church began engaging with Old Kuki tribes in Chandel. Converts were not merely taught Christian doctrine, they were re-socialized into identifying as Nagas. Pastors were trained to preach a version of history that erased Kuki affiliations and emphasized an artificial Naga brotherhood. Church records began replacing Kom, Anal, and Lamkang identities with Naga Christian designations. In many cases, Baptist churches affiliated with the Tangkhul-led bodies refused to ordain pastors or admit congregations unless they accepted the Naga identity. This ecclesiastical pressure led to a psychological shift among some members of these tribes. Faith, which should have been a matter of personal belief, became a gateway to political affiliation. The NSCN-IM did not solely rely on theological persuasion. It also used coercive tactics. Villages that refused to toe the Naga line were denied development funds from church bodies and humanitarian agencies. In some cases, road projects, school funds, and food distribution were contingent upon accepting the Naga identity. Leaders from the Anal and Kom tribes were offered prominent positions in NSCN-IM's administrative structure if they agreed to publicly declare themselves as Nagas. Those who complied were given Naga certificates and inducted into Naga civic organizations. On the flip side, resistance was met with intimidation. Several community leaders and activists who spoke up about the forced re-identification were either silenced or killed. The fear of reprisal ensured a growing silence within these communities. The psychological warfare was profound. To many, especially the younger generation, being Naga became synonymous with being educated, accepted, and connected. Traditional Kuki customs, oral histories, and dialects began to be neglected or discarded. Manipulating church histories and language. A significant part of the NSCN-IM's effort went into rewriting local histories through the church and education systems. Sunday schools taught children not only biblical lessons but also ethnic propaganda. Christian textbooks published by Tangkhul-led publishers emphasized a homogenized Naga identity and omitted Kuki contributions or narratives. Traditional Kuki festivals and rituals were labeled as pagan and discouraged. The use of indigenous dialects was frowned upon in favor of Nagamese or English. Elders who tried to pass down oral traditions were marginalized or labeled as anti-Christian. In this environment, many from the Anal and Com communities began to internalize the belief that to be modern, to be Christian, and to be accepted by powerful organizations like NSCN-IM, one must relinquish their old Kuki identity and become a Naga. Another strategy employed by NSCN-IM was the splintering of church denominations to weaken the collective Kuki Christian identity. For instance, the Kuki Baptist Convention and the Kuki Christian churches were branded as tribalistic or exclusive, whereas the Naga-dominated Baptist Church of India was portrayed as inclusive and superior. Funds were channeled to churches that supported Naga expansionism. Mission trips were organized to reconvert or reorient churches in Kuki areas. In many parts of Chandel, Kuki churches were taken over or absorbed into larger Naga Baptist associations, changing not only their administrative affiliations but also their doctrinal priorities. This ecclesiastical colonization served to divide the Christian Kuki community, preventing any united religious resistance to NSCN-IM's political ambitions. The consequence of this religious-political hybrid war has been deeply damaging to the old Kuki tribes. Many among the Anal and Com are today confused about their heritage. In government records, they are listed as one ethnicity, while in church records, they are registered under another. This duality has fragmented their cultural continuity and weakened their collective political bargaining power. In some cases, entire villages have been split with one section aligning with Naga identity under church influence, and the other trying to preserve their Kuki roots. Family disputes, community tensions, and social alienation have become common. Moreover, by incorporating old Kuki tribes into the Naga fold, the NSCN-IM has artificially inflated its demographic claims over Chandel and neighboring regions, justifying its demands for integration into Greater Nagalim, despite historical evidence to the contrary. Despite this sustained effort by NSCN-IM and the Tangkhul Baptist Church, not all have surrendered. In recent years, cultural revival movements among the Com, Anal, and Lamkang have started to reassert their Kuki identity. Community leaders, scholars, and youth activists are organizing heritage festivals, publishing historical research, and creating platforms for intertribal unity. Some churches have chosen to dissociate from the Tangkhul-led ecclesiastical structures and formed independent synods that reaffirm both faith and ethnic heritage. These efforts, though fragile, mark a resistance against forced homogenization. It is also encouraging to see a new generation of Kuki intellectuals and theologians speaking out, challenging the misuse of religion as a tool for political assimilation. The story of how the NSCN-IM and the Tangkhul Baptist Church redefined the identity of old Kuki tribes like the Anal and Com is not just a local issue. It is a case study in how religion can be manipulated to serve ethno-political agendas, how faith communities can be turned into instruments of cultural erasure, and how vulnerable tribes can be coerced into disowning their history. If identity is a sacred thread woven through memory, culture, and tradition, then what has happened in Chandel is nothing less than a silent dispossessiona, displacement not of land, but of the soul. True reconciliation and peace in these hills can only begin when communities are allowed to choose their identity without coercion. and when faith is returned to its rightful place as a source of healing, not hegemony. Disclaimer: this article is a documentary-style narrative intended for educational and analytical purposes. The views expressed do not necessarily represent the editorial stance of Zalengam Media. Readers are encouraged to engage critically and consult multiple sources for a comprehensive understanding.